In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplin Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplin's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
All right, Chaplin's Report today, we're going to go ahead and go to the Gospel of John. And this is not long after I say this. I'll have to preface it by saying this. The Gospel of John's not exactly written in chronological order. It's almost written as a commentary or as a topical study on the life of Jesus. So it's certainly taking episodes out of Jesus's life, but it's not necessarily doing them in chronological order. And so this particular saying may not have come exactly after the woman at the well, the chapter right before it, but it certainly fits in with John's theme here and the message that he's trying to communicate. So in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verses 33 through 36, you have sent to John, talking about John the Baptist, not John the Apostle. You have sent to John, and he has testified to the truth. But the testimony which I receive is not from a man, but I say these things so that you may be saved. He was in the lamp, and that was burning and was shining, and you were willing to rejoice for a while in his light. But the testimony which I have is greater than the testimony of John. For the works which the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works that I do, testify about me that the Father has sent me. So there's a couple things that I want to discuss looking at that particular verse. First of all, you look at the first verse there in 33, where it talks about John being testifying to the truth, but the testimony which I have received. So Jesus is contrasting himself there. He's saying, you're talking about the testimony of John. Now you're talking about testimony from me. These are two different things. John's testimony had a different purpose than the testimony of Jesus Christ. Because as great as John was, he was strong in the Spirit, he was speaking for God, he was a prophet, but he was still a guy. He was still a man. He was not God. And so there is a contrast there between himself and between Jesus. Jesus says, when I speak, it's as if the Father is speaking. And so he's talking about his oneness with God. He's talking about the deity that Jesus himself dwells in, the deity that he possesses. And he's talking about the superiority of his message. Basically, he's saying, John was one of God's mouthpieces. He was a prophet, and his testimony was good. And you were well within your right. You were correct to bask and rejoice in the light of John's testimony. But just so you know, now I'm here. And my testimony is greater than the testimony of John. And so this is what Jesus is alluding to. As great as the testimony of great men can be, they are not to be taken more seriously than the testimony of Jesus Christ himself. There is a superiority that takes place there. Jesus was unlike any other man that was here, because he was the only begotten Son of God. And he says there in verse 35, he was the lamp that was burning and shining, and you were willing to rejoice for a while in its light. But the testimony I have is greater than the testimony of John, because God has given it to me to accomplish the very works that I do. So what's the works that he does? Well, he came to heal the sick, to let the blind see, to feed the hungry. And then, of course, ultimately, we know that the work that he accomplished was his death on the cross. And so that great work that Jesus finally came in culmination, he was saying, as good as John was, he was still a man. And that sets a precedent for us. You don't put people on pedestals that are too high for them. John was a great man. In fact, Jesus said in another passage, among those born of women, there is not one greater than John the Baptist. Man, what a compliment to receive from the person who created the earth. What a compliment to receive. That's wonderful. But John's still just a person. We see this later in Revelation where the Apostle John falls down on his face and worships an angel. And the angel says, no. I'm just a messenger like you. You don't worship me. And so there is this understanding that Jesus and God are completely separate. They're on a completely different plane. And what does that mean? Well, if John's testimony is a lamp, then we must assume that Jesus' testimony is the sun. Jesus is the source. As good as it is to get testimony from a prophet, you're much better off getting it from the horse's mouth. And that really shows the necessity of Jesus coming to earth. There was not a man that was able to accomplish what Jesus accomplished. We were incapable of it. We could not live perfectly. We could not live according to the law and live sinless lives. And we also couldn't speak the way that Jesus spoke. We see another passage where the elders sent Roman soldiers out to arrest Jesus. And when they came back and didn't have Jesus, they said, well, why didn't you arrest him? He says, no man ever spoke like this. Even people that were unlearned, that were not well-versed in Jewish law or anything like that, they saw Jesus and went, whoa, something is different about him. And so because of that, we understand that Jesus is really the source of all things. All that is good, all that is wise, all logic, all reason, it all stems from him, which should do a couple of things. First of all, it should make us grateful and realize that the talents we have, the abilities that we have, they're not a credit to us. We get them from Jesus. We get them from God. We get them from our Creator. And so we ought to use whatever we have at our disposal, be it money, be it fame, be it a great speaking voice, be it a talent for leading songs, be it a talent for helping others and being compassionate, whatever it is. All those things come from God. He's the original source. And so while we may be a lamp, we may have taken that heat and that light from God, we have to remember that he's still the source, and that will make us grateful, and it will also make us humble, because we realize that he is really the one who provides us with everything that we have. And that should also instill in us a sense of duty to use it in a way that he would see fit. Because if we're using it for a purpose that it was not intended for, then we're going to wind up hurting ourselves, and more importantly, hurting God, because he's seeing a gift that he gave us being abused or misused. And so what we should strive to do is to be like John. We realize we're not Jesus. We realize that even though we try to be like him, we're never going to be exactly like Jesus, even though he's the example that was put forward. And so what we need to do is we need to strive every single day to be a source of light to others, to be a lamp to others, that even though we know we're not God, that they get to see a little bit of God through us. They get to see a little bit of his light, a little bit of his love, a little bit of his empathy and compassion and his mercy. And if we do that, then just like John, that will be somebody that Jesus can say, other people basked in your light. You were able to spread the influence of God to other people. And that will be a compliment worthy of being received. A compliment that we can truly be proud of in a life that we can hang our hat on. Stay the course, friends.